Welcome to the Climate Book Review. The Climate Book Review is a radio show and podcast featuring book reviews, author interviews, and reading lists for fiction, nonfiction, and poetry with climate themes. Climate Book Review airs every Friday at 10:30 a.m. Central on WDBX 91.1 FM, solar-powered community radio for Southern Illinois. You can also find the show online at wdbx.org, climatebookreview.com, and on your favorite podcast app or site. This show is hosted by me, Tree Song. The two main segments are the Climate Book of the Week and the Climate Reading List of the Week. If you have suggestions for the show, please email us at info@climatebookreview.com. This week's episode is airing during WDBX's Spring Pledge Drive. WDBX is an amazing community radio station that brings listeners a wide variety of unique music and talk radio all day, every day. I like to say that we have every type of music you can imagine and some that you can't even imagine. That goes for the talk as well. Please show your support for WDBX today. Visit wdbx.org to make a one-time donation or to set up a recurring monthly donation to support this show and all of the other excellent programming here at WDBX. Now it's time for the Book of the Week, the Climate Book of the Week. This week's Climate Book of the Week is New York 2140 by Kim Stanley Robinson. If any of the authors or editors of the books that we mention on here would like to be a guest in a future episode of the Climate Book Review, I'd be happy to have them. In the meantime, here's my review. And this is a review I wrote a few years ago, so let's see if I have any added commentary as we go through it. But this is New York 2140. New York 2140 is an ambitious novel about what New York City will be like in the year 2140 if human-caused global warming continues unchecked. If you're interested in New York or global warming, climate change, science fiction, political fiction, or any and all of the above, I strongly recommend you read this novel. The novel starts with a series of chapters that introduces a colorful cast of characters who all live in New York City in the year 2140. At first, these characters and their stories seem mostly unrelated. This is a common in a lot of the Kim Stanley Robinson novels, where you establish all of these characters one by one and then slowly network them together. He is quite the long-winded author. So as the novel progresses, however, their lives intersect in various ways, eventually coming together to tell a single complex and multifaceted story. The build-up of the plot will seem very slow to some readers, especially those not used to reading a 624-page novel. I enjoyed reading a novel that length. I know it is not for everyone, so I'm putting that out there. Robinson spends almost a novel's worth of words simply introducing the many main characters and the city that they call home. Honestly, I'm convinced that the city of New York itself is the main character of this novel. However, the stories of the individual characters were interesting enough and diverse enough that I found myself staying engaged from cover to cover. I also quickly realized that the main character of this novel is, in fact, as the title suggests, New York City itself. Even when the characters haven't had much interaction with each other yet, their individual stories were made all the more interesting by the fact that they served as glimpses into various aspects of life in the city. New York 2140 is half love letter to New York City and half treatise on human-caused global warming. I consider it a success on both fronts, and the two aspects of this narrative fit together almost seamlessly. However, it's important to consider both aspects separately. Let me start by saying that I'm not from New York. I've only passed through New York a few times without really getting to know the city. I'm not sure if that makes me unqualified to assess the novel's portrayal of New York City, or especially qualified. I'd say it's a little bit of both. I have no way to assess how accurate this portrayal of life in the city is, and frankly, I'm sure I was missing out on the significance of some of the frequent detailed references to particular streets and to the history of the city. There were times when the details just blurred together for me because of that. A New Yorker would have gotten much more from the novel in that sense. But I can also say that as an outsider to the city, I found his depiction of New York in the year 2140 very interesting and compelling. I don't know if he's captured the spirit of the city in any real sense, but he's definitely played well to the romanticism of the city as viewed by outsiders. I can think of how it relates to my experience of stories I've heard of New York and how I've seen it portrayed in other media. As for New York 2140's depiction of human-caused global warming, it combines a rare and refreshing mix of utopian and dystopian elements. Now, if you listen, that is a recurring theme of some of my favorite portrayals of the climate crisis, is touching on both the utopian and the dystopian. In the novel, some areas of New York and other coastal cities are permanently flooded and have either adapted to the new reality or fallen into the sea. Others are part of the new intertidal. This is the zone that's underwater during high tide and above water during low tide. Oceans have risen significantly, coastal cities have gone partially underwater, and there's been tremendous economic and political fallout because of it. The flooding-related aspects of the plot and setting often seemed dystopian and semi-apocalyptic, which I appreciated since it seems very much in line with some projections about what the world may actually be like in 2140. But the overall tone is more hopeful than anything else I had seen at the time in such a catastrophe-laden setting. Yes, we've lost the coast to some oceans in the novel, and there are some major problems associated with that. But life goes on. The people of New York City have shown remarkable resilience in their adaptation to new circumstances. The rich have built incredibly tall, high-tech super skyscrapers and sealed the first couple of floors of inhabited buildings in flooded areas, using advanced materials specifically designed for that purpose. While the poor have made do as they always do, squatting abandoned buildings in the intertidal zones as they slowly decay and collapse into the ocean. Together, they've resettled the drowned coast and intertidal zone in spite of the technological and legal challenges of doing so. It is a strange yet compelling situation where something horrible has happened, but people are still living and thriving there anyway. This rare combination of utopian and dystopian elements actually left me with a slight twinge of renewed hope that human civilization won't actually self-destruct by the end of this century. The consequences of human-caused global warming will be extreme, and the novel did a good job of portraying some of those consequences. But it also portrayed our uncanny ability to survive, and to thrive even in the harshest of circumstances. And that's part of what's fascinating to me, is often the novels that portray catastrophic consequences portrayed as sort of the end of the world. But in this novel, it's not the end of the world, it is a shift from what was to what becomes. Honestly, given our current trajectory, I suspect humanity's lot in 2140 will be worse than what this novel indicates. Even so, New York 2140 offers a very believable version of events where catastrophic global warming occurs, yet humanity has done its best to adapt and survive anyway. That combination of a grim portrayal of the very real problems we face, and a visionary look at what we can do about those problems, really sets this novel apart as a unique and powerful exploration of the realities of anthropogenic global warming and our response to it. Now, no novel is without its flaws. The sheer length of this novel seems a bit indulgent, as do a number of the other elements, including the nameless citizen character's meandering musings, and some of the side plots that establish character and setting without really relating to the main plot. Yeah, the nameless citizen who's meandering, it just kind of seems like Kim Stanley Robinson's self-insertion as he analyzes the situation. However, both by virtue of his award-winning track record as a science fiction author, and by the truly epic scope of the tale that he's telling, Kim Stanley Robinson has more than earned a bit of our indulgence. Even after 600 pages of reading, I still found myself fully engaged and not wanting the novel to end. This is excellent fiction, and it speaks powerfully to the theme of anthropogenic global warming, which I believe to be the greatest existential crisis humanity faces today. So that was my review of New York 2140 by Kim Stanley Robinson. Now it's time for the Climate Reading List of the Week. This week's Climate Reading List of the Week is Climate Fiction Writers League. This is a reading list about the Climate Fiction Writers League. You can learn more about the Climate Fiction Writers League by visiting climate-fiction.org. And this is an exciting one, reading this reading list of the Climate Fiction Writers League. It's a group of authors who believe in the necessity of climate action immediately and absolutely. Their website features a prominent quote that offers a good synopsis of what they do and why they do it. And here's the quote. "Fiction is one of the best ways to inspire passion, empathy, and action in readers. Our works raise awareness of climate change and encourage action at the individual, corporate, and government levels." That was from the Climate Fiction Writers League website. The Climate Fiction Writers League has a membership of over 200 authors from around the world. They've collectively published hundreds of novels, short stories, and other works of fiction and creative nonfiction, such as essays, etc., with climate themes. Now, most of the climate change reading lists that we will feature on this show have probably around 8 to 12 or so books that all fit a specific theme or fit a topic related to the climate crisis. But this is a much longer list. This is a huge collection of all the works that these climate fiction authors have been able to find. Now, it would take the whole half hour to even begin to list all of these ones, so I'm not going to list off individual titles. I just wanted to bring this reading list to your attention. I do want to mention some of the authors that are mentioned in here. If you go to climate-fiction.org, I don't have this fully assembled on any of my websites, so theirs is the best source to go to find this currently. They've got it broken down into authors based in the USA and Canada, authors based in Great Britain, different parts of the world, Australia, New Zealand, Europe, and let's see what other sections. Asia, they've got a section for as well, South America, basically as many parts of the world as they have found these authors and had membership of these authors. I see some authors I know on there, Cory Doctorow, Paolo Bacigalupi. I've read some of these authors and some I have not read yet, and I'm excited to explore as many of these titles as I can get to in one lifetime. There's only so many hours in a day to read. But this is some of our other reading lists. If you want to find a few titles on a specific theme, that is more what to go to. If you want to get a broad overview of as many authors as possible who are writing about climate change, and then sort of pick and choose which ones you find the more interesting, then that's a good thing for this, to go to the Climate Fiction Writers League. So if you look at this and you find any titles that aren't on the list, then be sure to let us know. You can email me at info@climatebookrareview.com. If I get enough interest, I might also start a reading list for climate fiction authors who aren't members of the Climate Fiction Writers League. Now, this league currently only accepts traditionally published authors, which is a sort of an industry buzzword for authors who are published by big corporate publishing houses. So that's currently who they accept. It would be nice to have a list of all the authors who have a similar dedication to climate fiction but are not published through that route. They may be through indie publishers, they may be self-published, but I am going to work on a list as well of those authors. But in the meantime, it is wonderful to have this Climate Fiction Writers League where you can learn about all these published authors who have a dedication to writing about climate change and including it in their novels. That may be anything from a novel or a short story where the entire focus is climate change, to the increasingly popular approach where instead of doing that, you have a story that is just like any other. It may be a romance story, it may be comedy, it may be drama, it could be about anything else, but you weave climate into the story because it is a part of the world in which we live. And especially in stories that delve into the near future as well, it is even more important to include climate. But right now, we are already experiencing the consequences of climate change, and there are already solutions to it in place. So it is fun and exciting to see. I was blown away when I saw how many authors it was. I knew this league existed, but when I did my research for the episode, over 200 authors from around the world. That is exciting to see what they're writing. And it is great to have a reading list where we can look among them and see what we would like to read next. So if you would like more details on that reading list, you can go to climatebookreview.com, or you can go straight to the source to climate-fiction.org. Thank you for listening to the Climate Book Review. You can find more information about this episode and show at climatebookreview.com. If you have suggestions for the show, please email us at info@climatebookreview.com. If you enjoyed this episode, you can support the show by telling your friends, giving the show a 5-star rating on your favorite podcast app, or of course, especially this week, donating to the WDBX. We are currently doing our spring pledge drive, as I mentioned earlier. This is a community radio station, one of only 3 in the state of Illinois, where we are broadcasting from. And we've got, as I said before, we've got just every kind of music that you can imagine and some you can't even imagine. And we've got talk as well. Wonderful community resource. So if you are listening to this, then you clearly enjoy it. So please help us keep this show and station on the air. You can donate by visiting wdbx.org. Thank you to WDBX for broadcasting this show and many other good shows. Thank you to Liborio Conti for the music that we use between segments. And thank you to Ed Hawkins for the warming stripes graphic that we use in our logo. You can learn more about that at showyourstripes.info. Finally, thank you to everyone who is reading, writing, and taking action in response to the climate crisis. With our powers combined, we can make climate justice a reality. And as the Climate Fiction Writers League pointed out, all of this reading that we do related to the climate crisis helps us to make climate justice a reality.